The pack brayed viciously. Horned muzzles lifted toward the starry sky, illuminated from below by several bonfires lit around the towering stone whose silhouette stood out against the stars. The hole issuing from the throats must have carried for at least a few miles. The clearing where the dark man here stood was churned up by the hoofs of these creatures, which seems to circle it rhythmically. From his position, Jonas had a great view of their inner circle. But it wasn't the sight that was the worst. It was the smell. They say one can get used to even the foulest of smells after just a few minutes of exposure to it, supposedly. Jonas hadn't gotten used to the stench of these creatures since they had captured him, and that was a good 3 days ago. During that time, the smaller kind of the horned creatures, though Jonas was still tied with a strong rope, would bring him water from time to time and some disgusting slime they tried to feed him with. At first, he resisted, but on the second day he broke. Afterwards, he fell into a strange, deep sleep. In it, he wandered through a cursed forest, where skulls and bones hung from the branches of black trees, and the scattered skeletal remains laying on the ground were overgrown by the roots. At first, it seemed the forest had no end, but after a long trek, Jonas has reached his edge, a fog-shrouded battlefield where mutilated bodies of the dying writhed like layers of worms. On the horizon loomed a massive, unnaturally tall fortress of black stone. Then he woke up, screamingly. Lying bound beneath that black stone, he didn't really know how many days he'd spent in captivity anymore. The ranks of the beastmen slowly parted, creating a corridor through which a creature unlike any Jonas had ever seen sauntered toward him. It was clearly larger than the others, leaning on a twisted pole topped with a horned skull. It had 2 pairs of horns, though one was broken off. The tips of the other 3 were adorned with trinkets that, reflecting the light from the fires, causing blood-red spots to move chaotically across its elongated muzzle with every movement of its bestial head. In his mind, Jonas dubbed it the Lame One. The Lame One slowly approached the raised platform where the prisoner was, then turned his back to him. The herd fell silent, and the Lame One, shaking his staff every so often, began to emit modulated grunts, whistles, and brays. The herd occasionally responded enthusiastically to these sounds. Jonas didn't have the strength to pray for the rescue. He prayed for it when they have captured him. Later, he prayed for a quick death. Now, he was surprised to discover that he wasn't even afraid anymore. Instead, he imagined himself as an outside observer, calmly watching the events unfolding, trying to learn as much as he could. The Lame One was surely the leader or some kind of a shaman. After all, they hadn't killed Jonas outright. They were keeping him for a special occasion, which had undoubtedly arrived. But why now? Why here? After all, such large herds of beastmen had never roamed the area before. They had been small groups, of course, but none of them as big as this herd. What had lured them here? The Lame One stood over him, holding a black blade in his paw. Jonas never found out the answers to his questions. If you think about it for a second, it turns out that the chaos from the world of Warhammer is self-contradictory in its nature. It wants to annihilate the world, together with all the emotions existing within it, even though they are its greatest source of energy. It's at its most dangerous when united and organized, and even its most devoted children create their own, separate hierarchies. And I do not mean just any band of chaos warriors who will achieve undisputed leadership through vicious infighting. Even the true children of chaos, such as the beastmen, create social structures which allow them to survive and expand in a grim and dangerous world. Hi, I'm Werner from the Ratcatcher Tales channel, where we dive deep into the Warhammer fantasy lore. Today, we will take a closer look at those without whom no beastman warherd is complete, the Bray Shamans. On average, a life of a beastman is rather short and filled to the brim with violence. Violence, which comes from those with bigger horns, which obviously situates them higher in the warherd's hierarchy, from those who possess greater strength, and of course violence directed at the despised humans. However, in the midst of all this violence, there exists one unique caste against the members of which no beastmen would dare to raise their hand. They are the Bray Shamans, the heart and the memory of every warherd, the advisors of beast lords and mediators between them and their dark gods. Becoming a Bray Shaman is no picnic for any beastman. None of them can just start following their current shaman in hopes that they will teach them how to use magic so that one day they can take their place. No, Bray Shamans of the Beastmen are born with an instinctual understanding of the winds of magic and a special bond between them and their dark patrons who, in exchange, mark the newborn with heterochromatic eyes. As far as the appearance goes, this is the only thing that all Bray Shamans have in common. Other than the eyes, each of them can look and behave very differently. Each of them, over the course of their lives, will most likely also experience individual mutations. Pardon me, I meant blessings. Bray Shaman's differing eye color symbolizes which of the chaos gods they are bound to. Blue or golden eyes are the sign of the blessing of Tsinch. Green or brown belong to Nurgle. Pink or purple relate to Slanesh, while red eyes are a symbol of Khorne's warrior shamans. As previously mentioned, all Bray Shamans also share the respect they are shown by the members of the warherd. Of all warherds, as a matter of fact. For just a second, let's forget about the fact that Bray Shamans are mediators between the warherd and their patron Chaos God, and focus on how they are among the only beastmen who are capable of using magic, which on its own is a reason good enough to never mess with them. Moreover, Bray Shamans, although not as mighty and powerful as Bestigors, are still more clever than them and hold a special position in their warheads by advising their chieftains and leading the rituals and ceremonies of the beastmen dwelling in the darkest wilderness of the world of Warhammer. But what do these rituals look like? Well, our sources are limited, and most people who had seen them up close never lived to tell the tale. But that doesn't mean there is no information to find in the world of Warhammer. One of the greatest experts on beastmen behavior is Lord Magister Setante Lobas of the Umber Brotherhood, who, although in the form of a wolf, studied the behavior and customs of beastmen. His observations paint out an image of surprisingly complex hierarchies and traditions cultivated by multiple warherds. There might be differences between them, of course, but Lobas describes certain rituals which often appear in his observations. For instance, the way in which several beastmen tribes merge into a single large one, mostly to attack nearby human settlements with their combined forces. As it turns out, it is not a matter of accident, but a result of a relatively complex ritual in which Bray Shamans are indispensable. Bray Shaman takes on leadership role as soon as the warherd reaches the place where the ceremony will be held. Most of the time, that place is far from any human settlements, and in the center of it stands a hearthstone, an obelisk or a menhir, the beastmen dedicated to their tribe and its patron gods. The location of such a hearthstone is never random. It might have been erected at the crossing of magical ley lines, at the site of an ancient warpstone meteor impact, or within an ancient druidic circle of power. It could also be a desecrated waystone created by elves in the ancient times, or a totem decorated with sacrifices to the dark gods. The exact appearance of a hearthstone depends on many factors, but what's most important is that it is always erected at a place in some way sacred to the beastmen and one which has some connection to magic. After a beast lord, who seeks a meeting with other beastmen chieftains in this sacred place, leads their people there, they light a massive bonfire together with their Bray Shaman, which is often placed at the base of the aforementioned hearthstone. When the bonfire's flame burns high, Bray Shamans add to it large amounts of herbs and other substances, which can induce an altered state of consciousness when burned. Such a bonfire is kept going for quite a long time, and during subsequent nights, other warherds present in the area join the gathering, lured in there by the light and smoke from the herbs, which is often heavy and even emanating various colors from other added substances, green for example. Anyways, during the subsequent nights, other beast lords join the meeting with the warherds, and when everyone is present, the one who initiated the gathering relays the reason for it to the others. The next several hours are spent on debating the presented issue, usually some sort of a raid plan, listening carefully to the advice of the Bray Shamans. Meanwhile, other members of the warherd are busy with feasting, dancing to the animalistic tunes, and other more or less violent activities. Some collect around the Bray Shamans, the ones not taking part in the meeting of the Beast Lords, to listen to their tales of bygone battles and other events meaningful to the children of chaos. As far as beastmen go, it's all relatively peaceful, and Lord Magister Lobas is certain that during such ceremonies the custom prevents the attendants from spilling the blood of their kin. At least not in the presence of their sacred obelisk, that is. After the Beast Lords, aided by Bray Shamans, agree on a plan, all the bestigors who want to lead the attack attend a ceremonial brawl which determines who becomes the leader. Let's face it, fighting is what those meetings are all about. But, surprisingly, that particular fight is supposed to be bloodless, and it takes place inside a circle created by the members of the collected warherds. Two chieftains enter it with hands tied behind their backs, and duel by headbutting their opponent with their horns, something like a deer in rat. Regardless of who emerges as a victor, it is apparent that, despite the group being led by the Beast Lords, Bray Shamans play a very important role, and without their involvement, a meeting of two, or possibly even more, warherds would ultimately lead to bloodshed. Another ritual, which illustrates just how vital Bray Shamans are in a beastman society, is something the humans call the Champion's Feast. It has nothing to do with honoring a champion, but rather with leadership succession within the warherd. If the bestigor, who was the warherd's beast lord, dies, the other members of the tribe need to choose their successor somehow. Bray Shamans enter the picture again, this time as the keepers of tradition. Tradition which dictates that the most loyal members of the warherd devour the body of their fallen chieftain. The higher one was in the warherd hierarchy, the tastier piece they got during the feast. The bestigor chosen as the successor is given the heart, as, according to the beliefs of the children of chaos, this is where the strength and wisdom of each beastman lies, and consuming it is supposed to guarantee that those positive attributes will then manifest in the next chieftain. Bray Shaman's authority is what keeps the beastmen from straying away from this custom. Moreover, Bray Shamans offer advice to a warherd whose fallen beast lord's body cannot be eaten. For example, when it was entirely destroyed, which is read as a bad omen, and during those extremely rare instances when a chieftain is blessed by their god and becomes a demon or a chaos spawn. It is the Bray Shaman who will know exactly what a warherd is supposed to do in case of such an event. And if they don't, for whatever reason, they can always consult the warherd's patron god. To do this, Bray Shamans can enter a deep, coma-like trance, during which their spirits exit their bodies to enter a different plane of existence, which I personally deem suspiciously similar to the realm of chaos. There, they communicate with patron demons of the warherd, and sometimes even with the ruinous powers themselves. To achieve this, they, reportedly, fortify their natural magical abilities with considerable amounts of alcohol, seasoned with various herbs and mushrooms. Astral projection is by far not the only ethereal ability of Bray Shamans. I can give you at least one example of their magical abilities being used not in a direct confrontation with an enemy forces on a field of battle, but for a subtle change of their foe's perception of reality. The aforementioned ability was used in the Dukedom of Musillon, where one of the local beast lords wanted to turn the local pheasants into obedient cultists of the woodland mutants, as if their lives weren't hard enough as they were. Anyway, his Bray Shamans were said to have sent dreams to the village elders, in which they persuaded them that the locals should leave some of their children in the wilderness as a sacrifice. Some of those children were fattened, slaughtered, and then eaten by the beastmen, but some were said to be held as slaves who worshipped their hairy overlords. The campaign, quite complex as far as the beastmen go, was somewhat successful, which was helped by the fact that the villages whose elders did not obey were attacked by the beastmen, which further served to fortify the message conveyed by the Bray Shamans in the dreams they sent. Some of the children, raised in the woods, later returned to human settlements to spread the cult of the beastmen among their fellow humans. Many people claim that Bray Shamans can also change their form and morph into animals to spy for their warherd. Countless stories are being told of attacks of the horned beast of the woods, which were preceded by a visit from the three-eyed raven or evil-eyed foxes and owls. One who cannot under any circumstances be accused of possessing evil eyes was Kralmo, the Bray Shaman who prophesied the return of Morgur, a monstrously mutated leader of the corrupted who has been bothering the inhabitants of the Old World for centuries, mainly the elves of Ataloren and Laurelord. The reason this accusation does not apply to Kralmo is because he's blind. But at the same time, one cannot say that he lacks vision, all thanks to his uncanny ability to predict the future with unerring accuracy, guided by visions that the Chaos Gods sent him. Aforementioned magical abilities seem rather light when compared to, let's say, striking your foes down with a comet, and it's because they are based on descriptions and not Warhammer Wargame mechanics. However, if we were to use them, we would conclude that the Bray Shamans are able to use a wide variety of spells from various lores of the Winds of Magic, and it's not necessarily clumsily mixed into one giant bolt of dar. After all, as previously mentioned, Bray Shamans are born with an instinctual understanding of magic, and the magistes of the contemporary colleges of magic should not underestimate them under any circumstances. Especially since it's very difficult to prepare for such a confrontation, as each of the Bray Shamans may wield a unique combination of spells. Multiple Warhammer Fantasy Battle army books spread across different editions teach us that most Bray Shamans use magic from the lores of Beast, Death and Shadow, so the winds of Gur, Sheish and Ulgu are in play here. Bray Shamans who bear the marks of Nurgle, Slanesh or Tzinch have access to spells from all of their patrons' domains, while the Bray Shamans of Khorne would rather not disgrace themselves with using magic in a fight. The new Old World arcane journals and rulebooks give Bray Shamans the ability to use demonology, dark magic and elementalism. Total War adds another lore of magic, named Wild Magic, which is said to be the lore of beasts corrupted by Dar. Clearly, the wide variety of magical abilities can prove a difficult challenge, even to a powerful adversary. Bray Shamans have another surprise up in their sleeve, although in my opinion it works best in an RPG campaign scenario, and it's called Ritual Magic. I've previously mentioned the rituals that allow them to contact their dark deities, but I must also mention other rituals intended to ensure the warherd's favor with the ruinous powers, as well as make the inhabitants of the Old World sick, nauseated and bring them troubles in spades. But how, I hear you ask? Well, the details aren't entirely clear, but I often came across information about how the Bray Shaman rituals are a blasphemous variation on those the beastmen copied from the worshippers of the human gods. But they are often much longer, even more than ceremonies conducted in the Grand Cathedral of Sigmar in Altdorf. They can last for months, during which the Bray Shaman does nothing else, tasking his warherd with bringing him various ingredients, such as a few local peasants for ritual killing, or such unusual items as sands from distant deserts. The effects of such rituals can vary quite a bit, but a well-executed one can, for example, open up a rift to the realm of chaos, which, as anyone could easily deduce, can cause serious trouble. It must be added that Bray Shamans are amongst the brightest of the beastmen, and no one in their warherd if for no other reason than lack of a proper speech apparatus, possessed a greater understanding of the Dark Tongue, a ritual language of the mortal disciples of chaos. For that reason alone, they are the ones who most often come into contact with the human worshippers of the ruinous powers, who might become their allies in deconstructing the social hierarchy of the old world, or their greatest enemies. It all depends. As far as hierarchy is concerned, I must mention how it works within the caste of Bray Shamans. The most powerful of them are described in the sources as Greater Bray Shamans. They are distinguished not by larger staffs, although their staffs often are larger and decorated with more talismans, bones of their foes or desecrated text, but by the magical power they possess. The greatest of Bray Shamans are always gifted with a mark of chaos and can prove mighty adversaries. One of the mightiest of Bray Shamans, some may say he is the mightiest, is Gallagher, a huge winged beastman whose entire life's purpose is desecration and destruction of as many human temples and killing as many priests as possible. Gallagher does not serve a single beast lord and is respected enough for his advice to be taken seriously by many of them. Some even speculate that he alone guides the fate of the old world beastmen, traveling between sacred hearthstones and hidden chaos temples, performing rituals so foul that even other Bray Shamans never dare to repeat them. For the cult of Sigmar, it is Gallagher's winged figure that best embodies all of the evil of mutants, and the inhabitants of the old world know his image thanks to woodcuts imprinted on the pages of countless tomes and pamphlets. But for the beastmen, he is somewhat of a legendary figure, a true personification of humanity's inevitable doom. I believe that, considering the diversity Bray Shamans can bring to our RPG sessions, it's worth not to neglect them, and to show them not necessarily from the perspective of victims sacrificed to the ruinous powers under Morsleep's green moonlight. There are other, less deadly ways to introduce them to our players' characters. Perhaps a party of adventurers was hired by Imperial Zoologist to spy on one of the warherds. Or perhaps this is the exact same goal set by a few army officials who wish to eliminate them. After all, the fact that the party's magister or priest can transform into animal can make this task so much easier. Or, alternatively, we can introduce a Bray Shaman as a mysterious ally of the members of a chaos cult the player track. What might their plans and dealings be? Is it about acquiring some powerful herbs cultivated by the shaman to poison the local well for the glory of Nurgle? Introducing beastmen into our story in other way than as a convenient cannon fodder might give the players a new appreciation for this fascinating race. All being said, these are by far not the only possible ideas on how to implement Bray Shamans into our sessions. Personally, I always love to use the unforeseen consequences of events happening in the story's background. You want an example? Alright, here we go. Let's say that some of the villagers from some distant settlement suddenly grab their pitchforks and torches in the middle of the night and attack their neighbors. But only those living in houses in the upper part of the hill. Those of the culprits who were captured were unable to explain what drove them to do this, and their memories of the events are fuzzy. The local lord hired the players to reveal the mystery, behind which is a cloud of smoke from a bonfire where a Bray Shaman burned his mysterious herbs to call the local beastmen warherds for a gathering. But instead of spreading, the cloud laid over the local pond and made the people of the village go mad. Can the player characters uncover the mystery on time? Some strange sounds can be heard during the night, and the players don't know that the beastmen gathering is soon about to end, and the combined forces of several warherds are about to go on a pillaging raid. One could think of countless scenarios in which Bray Shamans are behind unseen events which start an entire chain of plot-related events. But, for now, we are reaching the end of our today's meeting. Please share with others in the comment section below what are your experiences with introducing Bray Shamans into your sessions. Perhaps one of them became your magic-wielding ally or nemesis. One has to admit that they have major potential for a great storyline. If you enjoyed our introduction to Bray Shamans, please subscribe to the Ratcatcher Tales channel and help us grow by sending a link to this video to someone who might also like that kind of a deep dive into the Warhammer fantasy lore. That's all for today, thank you and I hope to see you soon.